Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to KSR's rapid reaction of Kentucky's 76-54 loss to Texas to end Kenny Brooks' second season at Kentucky. The Cats finished with a 25-11 overall record, and we just wrapped up talking to Kenny and Tony Morgan, Tiani Key, and Amelia Hassett, three of Kentucky's five seniors. And, you know, I of course, always hate this time of year because, again, I'm not going to pretend to be, super close with the players and the team. Like, I don't go to dinner with them. I don't do all that. You know what I mean? But being around them and covering them, I do know them. I'd like to think a little bit. And it just really sucks to see when, I'm going to try to post it later on my Twitter, but Tiani Key gets really emotional at the podium talking about how much it meant to her to play at Kentucky. And I just kind of hate – I hate to see the season come to an end because I thought for the most part it was a really good season. To kind of just break down the Texas game real quick, and then we'll move on to, this season and the grand parts of, the big picture of what really transpired this year, and then we'll kind of get into next year's stuff a little bit. But firstly, with Texas, I would like to think that the big difference in the game was that 15-0 run Texas went on at the very beginning of the game, right? Amelia Hassett hits a three, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe we're here. Maybe we are here to compete and going to go to an Elite Eight. And unfortunately, it just didn't quite happen. Texas goes on that 15-0 run, and as Kenny Brooks told Holly Rowe, I think it was maybe at halftime or maybe right before the half, I can't remember, or after the game, Kenny Brooks was saying, hey, Texas is just on a different planet right now. And, they have, I think it's 11 straight games they've won, maybe. I don't remember off the top of my head, but when you see them beat South Carolina by 17 in the SEC Tournament Championship, you kind of figure that, okay, maybe Texas is rolling, right? Maybe, just a hunch. And they clearly are. They beat Oregon by dang near 50 points, beat Kentucky by 22. And, again, Kentucky just got off to a really bad start, was trailing 29-11 at the end of the first quarter. I mean, truly, that was Kentucky's worst quarter all season long. And it sucked because that was, I know the final difference is 22, but I like to think the flow of the game would have been different if you're closer at the end of the first quarter. That first time around, Kentucky trailed 23-19 at the end of the first quarter. If it's something like that, maybe this is a completely different basketball game. We'll never know. But, again, Kentucky falls, and it's just really unfortunate. I mentioned this on the podcast and how I thought there was reason to have some concern heading into this game because West Virginia and Texas played pretty similarly. Obviously, Texas is just a much better version of West Virginia, and West Virginia forced a ton of turnovers against Kentucky, and you're thinking, okay, is Kentucky just going to have a nightmarish time trying to handle the ball or getting the offensive flow going against Texas? And you kind of saw it, 24 turnovers, and Texas records 26 points off of those turnovers, and Kentucky forced 16 turnovers but only got 8 points off of those turnovers. Like, the only thing Kentucky did well in this game, and you can't even say they did anything well because, Texas shot 5 of 15 from the free throw line. Well, that doesn't really have anything to do with Kentucky. That's just Texas not making their free throws. Texas shot 3 of 9 from beyond the arc, only 33%, but they're not a great three-point shooting team anyway, right? Just a really bad time to have one of your worst games of the season, and especially one of your worst quarters of the season. But I feel like that's kind of it. Like, Kentucky just didn't have it today, and I think there's still clearly a pretty big difference between the cream of the crop in women's basketball and your next tier down, right? There's still a good difference there. The parity in the sport is growing, just not to that point just yet. But, I want to take a second and thank Tony Morgan, Amelia Hassett, Tiani Key, Josie Gilvin, and Jordan Obi for their contributions to the team, to the program. Right? Kenny Brooks was talking about after the game how, with NIL and the transfer portal and all this stuff, has only had Amelia Hassett and Tiani Key for 2 years, but he got just as emotional about them as he did a 4-year senior, or with Georgia Amore, a 5th-year senior, right? It sucks because those two, specifically Amelia and Tiani, they were here last year, and they kind of helped set the standard for what Kentucky women's basketball is going to be under Kenny Brooks. And I think those two specifically did a really good job of kind of living up to not only their expectations, but trying to elevate the program's expectations as well, right? I think with Tiani, I'm not going to say Tiani made this, if you just look at the production, I don't know if it was a gigantic improvement in production or anything like that. But when she goes down against Missouri, you clearly see how important she was, right? And I think about that moment because at that time Kentucky's 15-1, had just beaten LSU off that buzzer beater, and I think that Kentucky in the following AP polls ranked number 6. At that moment, that's probably the best Kentucky played all season. Is early January in that stretch before Tiani Key goes down. And then she gets hurt. She's out for 6 games, and you see just how important she is to this team. And then Amelia Hassett, she has the best 3-point shooting year in the history of Kentucky women's basketball. And as Kenny Brooks told us, and I wrote an article about, I think it was yesterday or last night it came out, how, Amelia really is the unsung hero for this team. Or at least she was, right? Amelia, I feel like she is often the first person that we as fans like to yell at. Because, dang it, Amelia, why are you missing this shot? Or, dang it, Amelia, why'd you let her score? But, again, like I said, I don't know if she hit 100 threes or not this season. She was close. I know she was at like a 98 or 99. Amelia finished 1 of 6 from 3 today. So, I don't know if she did quite reach 100. But, again, the best 3-point shooting year in the history of Kentucky women's basketball. And on the defensive end of the floor, she was always, tasked with guarding the best player on the other team, right? Like, if you looked at the scouting report and you said, or if you look at the box score or whatever, and you said, Phoenix, who is the best player on this, who's the best player for Kentucky's that they're playing? Amelia Hassett was going to guard him 9 times out of 10. And I thought all year long, for the most part, she did a really good job on both ends of the floor. I think with both Tiani and Amelia, they both had huge, huge impacts in the Louisville games, right? Both of them have the tremendous honor of saying, hey, I went 2-0 against Louisville, right? Help set that standard. And, of course, Louisville this year was really, really good. I know they lost kind of like Kentucky did in the Sweet 16 again today, but Louisville's a great team. And, obviously it's a rivalry game, and that's something they can hang their hat on. Toni Morgan, of course, hits the game winner at LSU, her biggest moment at Kentucky, had a big game against Oklahoma in that win, and was the ultimate, I think the ultimate point guard you needed to bridge between Georgia and Madden. Jordan Obi sacrificed a lot this season. So did Josie Gilvin, right? Josie, obviously, at WKU has this defined role, comes to Kentucky, and it's not as clearly defined. But, at the end of the year, I think plays herself into the rotation a little bit and, plays some meaningful minutes. And then when you have Jordan Obi, she started for the first 20, 25 games of the year and then ends up being the 6th man on the Kentucky team. And I think with each of the 5 seniors, you can look at their Kentucky careers and say, it was a positive, right? Like, they contributed mightily to the program. And again, you look at the season as a whole, Kentucky goes 25-11. I don't know if the record's as sexy as you want it to be, right? If you want the record to be sexy looking, instead of being 25-11, you probably want to be 29-7 or something like that, right? But again, with Tiani out, you lose some games maybe you shouldn't have or you otherwise would not have. And regardless of that, Kentucky this season under Kenny Brooks showed progress, right? Last year, Kentucky made the NCAA tournament, hosted, right? after not making the tournament, I think, since the 21-22 season under Kyra Elzy. Yeah, because that's when they won the SEC tournament championship. And, you make it to the second round last year. You're one bounce of the ball away from the Sweet 16. And then this year, you make the Sweet 16 because of one bounce of the ball at West Virginia. But regardless, it was a good Kentucky basketball season. There's a lot to be excited about. You have Madden Greenway, Savvy Swords, and Emily McDonald coming back. After the game, Kenny Brooks pretty much confirmed that Clara Strack would be back. To read what he said exactly, he said, "We have an All-American center coming back next year." That's obviously Clara Strack. And then kind of later on, he kind of also was talking about the Lisa Leslie Award. I'm pretty sure it's the award for best center. And there's 5 finalists, and Strack's the only junior on that. And he was like, the only junior on that list, she's coming back, and she's coming back to us. Talking about Clara Strack. So, I think we can take Kenny's word for it. Clara Strack will be back for her senior season. So you pair those 3 McDonald's All-Americans with Clara Strack. I would think Kaylin Carroll, Asia Boone for her senior season. I would think they're back. I have no reason to think Dawn Perova would leave, right? I mean, it's not like, she didn't play the last 2 years, but it's not because Kenny benched her. It's because she was hurt, right? So I would like to think that maybe she'd stick around and, give it a go next season. Lexi Blue, I don't know. Lexi Blue and Elsa Vadfors, I just don't know with them. I could see them both leaving, right? But I think Kentucky's got a pretty solid core coming back regardless. Obviously, again, with the 3 McDonald's All-Americans and then the All-American Honorable Mention in Clara Strack. But, I think as a whole, the season, it was a special year, and there were some special moments. I think if Tiani Key doesn't suffer a freak injury against Missouri, I think this team is rolling, and who knows what the season looks like. Maybe they lose 2 or 3, 4 or 5 less games, and maybe, instead of being a 5 seed, they're a 2 seed or a 3 seed or whatever, and then the matchups are better. Maybe Kentucky is in the Elite 8 right now. You just don't know. But regardless, I think, in year 2 under Kenny Brooks and with those 5 seniors, and you think about the core that'll be back and coming in next year, I think there's a lot to be excited about. I think with this team, if they had Elite 8, Final 4 potential at one point, I think that Tiani Key injury kind of messed things up a little bit. But overall, you look at the trajectory of Kentucky women's basketball, and it is a upward slope. So, again, 25-11 overall record. I just hate to see this year come to an end because I really enjoyed covering these girls. There's not a single bad apple on the team. They're all great kids, and I'm excited to cover the ones that are coming back again next year. So, I'm Phoenix Stevens here with KSR's rapid reaction to Kentucky's 76-54 loss to Texas. Today, I'm going to have transfer portal coverage. I'm going to have recruiting coverage. Going to have all that this summer. I wish Kentucky were still playing, but I hope you all are excited for this portal season because it's going to be wild. It's going to be all those things. I'm excited to see what the roster looks like a month from now, right? When the portal opens after the national title game, I'm excited to see what the roster looks like in about a month or so. So, I guess maybe, I don't know if it's exactly a month, like a month, maybe a month and a half, 2 months. We will see what this Kentucky women's basketball roster looks like for next year, and we'll have an idea of how good Kentucky can be. So, until next time, thank you all so much. Peace out, go Cats, all of those wonderful things. But before I do head out, I do want to say please like, comment, subscribe, do all those wonderful things for us. I appreciate it. Stephen Peak appreciates it. All of us here at KSR, appreciate it. And like I said, again, until next time, peace out and go Cats.